At a glance, what are the Psalms? The word psalm is derived from the Greek name of the book psalmoi, which translates to songs played to the accompaniment of a stringed instrument. The word psalter is a term used for a volume which contains the book of Psalms, typically with additional devotional material included as well. There have traditionally been two ways that the Psalms were numbered, one being based on Hebrew text and the other based on the Greek Septuagint. The anthologies of the Psalms comprise several collections of poetic prayers, composed at various times and places throughout ancient Israel. The Book of Psalms is divided into 5 books, a deliberate parallel to the 5 books of the Torah and the Pentateuch, and each ending with a doxology, which is a word of praise. Typically, modern-day Christian church services will end with a doxology in the form of a song.
There are 4 theologians who have significantly impacted the way the Psalms are interpreted dramatically. I'm Melanie, and I will cover the first 2, Hermann Gunkel and Zygmunt Mauwinkel, and Gina will tell y'all about Arthur Weiser and H.J. Krause. So let's start. Hermann Gunkel was a German biblical scholar who used form criticism when studying the Psalms. He created a type analytical approach which focused on dividing the Psalms into 5 major, and some other minor, Göttingen, which just means types or genres, based on the passage's form and content. He primarily differentiated between major and minor types through frequency of occurrence. He then used this genre information, as well as considered similar writings of other surrounding cultures of the era, to help him reconstruct the Sitzenleben, or life setting that influenced its composition. An example of how he applied his approach can be found in his interpretation of Psalm 24, where he identified 3 sections within the chapter, all of which are of the Hymnsgöttingen, but each with their own style. He ultimately hypothesized that they were originally different works, but were later merged together to be sung at some great annual feast, such as that of a New Year or of a dedication of the temple. So now let's shift to Zygmunt Mauwinkel. He was a Norwegian student of Gunkel who expanded upon, or redirected, Gunkel's type analytical approach of the Psalms to emphasize the fundamental cultic connections of differences in psalmistic genres and the life settings that influence how they were composed and used in Judaic cultus. If you're like me, the word cult brings a negative, scary connotation, but I learned that it just means an orderly framework or a system of religious worship. Zygmunt Mauwinkel is best known for his cult historical approach of the Psalms, which Lyric will explain in a bit.
All right, so we're going to continue looking at some theologians. They're not as big, but they still made important contributions in Psalm studies. One of them is Arthur Weiser. He was a professor at the University of Tübingen. He recognized that the idea of the enthronement festival that Mauwinkel, which is one of the theologians Melanie had just talked about, that Mauwinkel supposed was actually not supported in the Old Testament. While Weiser wanted to maintain the idea of the importance of a central cultic festival, he replaced the enthronement festival with the covenant renewal festival. So the idea of the annual covenant renewal festival that was really at the heart of Israel's liturgical year, and to which many, if not most, palms were connected. This is basically recognized as being a very important step after Mauwinkel. The other theologian we're going to be talking about is H.J. Krause. The Scholars Theology Journal commented on how the essence of Krause's views of the psalm is that many of them reverberate the life of the First Temple community. His writings on the significance of Zion and the court of the king in Psalter is perceptive and, for this reviewer at least, also persuasive. Yet at the same time, serious attention is given to the psalm and the life of the people more generally, regardless of ascertaining specific time in cultic context. So again, not as famous, but they both did huge literary works and really made a big contribution to the theology of the Psalms. Thank you, guys.
I'll be speaking on behalf of Lyric on the cult historical approach. Mauwinkel believed that religious text used in worship was to reenact it. This allowed people using the text to participate in significant religious experiences. Using this approach and borrowing from other religions that border Israel, he was able to conclude that Psalms was used as part of a festival. He theorized that there was an enthronement festival that was very similar to other festivals that other religions had during this time. The festival was broken up into 3 parts: celebration of Yahweh, victory of Yahweh over darkness, and establishment of the rule of Yahweh through enthronement. By using this method, he was able to connect almost 150 psalms to this enthronement festival.
Today I will be discussing how Psalms has been used in private and public worship. In private worship, King David of Israel is seemingly the first person in the Bible to use Psalms devotionally. In 2 Samuel 23:1, he is referred to as the sweet psalmist of Israel. He is also credited to have wrote most of Psalms. In public worship, King David was also responsible for traditionalizing temple worship by ordering musicians and singers to sing psalms. They happened to sing psalms in a particular pattern each day of the week. On Sundays, they sang Psalm 24, Mondays, Psalm 48, Tuesdays, Psalm 82, Wednesdays, Psalm 94, Thursdays, Psalm 81, Fridays, Psalm 93, and finally on Saturdays, Psalm 92. So I've also included scriptural indications of Psalms usage in early house churches. The first quote that I put says, "When you come together, everyone has a hymn or a word of instruction, a revelation, a tongue, or an interpretation. All of these must be done for the strengthening of the church." And this one can be found in 1 Corinthians 14:26. The next one's found in Ephesians 5:18b through 19a. It says, "Be filled with the Spirit, speak to one another with psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs." The third one says, "Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom, and as you sing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs with gratitude in your hearts to God." Colossians 3:16. And last one can be found in James 5:13. It says, "Is any one of you in trouble? He should pray. Is anyone happy? Let him sing songs of praise." And then the question that I have included for today's discussion is, how have modern attitudes toward public worship shifted?
Hi, my name's Ace, and I'll be speaking on how psalms were performed traditionally versus modern. The traditional affiliation of David with the Psalms and their musical association rests on solid biblical foundations. These include his youthful reputation as an accomplished player of the kinnor, a stringed instrument presumably plucked, and he was also known for his role in inventing or devising musical instruments and in composing or singing lamentations. Some superscriptions or headings may contain long-forgotten or now obscure instructions and other information pertaining to the musical performance or assigned occasions for their respective psalms, although interpretation of these superscriptions remains a contested issue among both biblical and musical scholars. Superscripts or subscripts are introducing or following a psalm, and they contain comments and directions. Ancient scribes indicated the genre and alleged authorship of the Psalms and their association with King David, as well as providing instructions on how to perform individual psalms. In the absence of precise musical notation, factors including matters of range, melismatic, or syllabic articulation, the emphasis of particular tones, embellishment, and even aspects of overall ambience amount only to verbal description and remains more academic and theoretical than artistic or aesthetic. In terms of melodic substance, there is no way to ascertain the exact modalities, tones, or determine the ordering and sequencing of those tones. Some of these elements may have been borrowed and transferred from Judaic traditions and handed down to us as church music practices evolved. Psalms were an integral part surrounding the ritualized activities that the Hebrew community created for symbolizing important public and personal situations. The Psalms are most significant in broader historical terms, the part David played in establishing Jerusalem. When translated into English, the Psalms don't rhyme, and they use many forms that are foreign to modernized worship music, so composers of modern psalm songs need to stretch both biblical text and musical idiom for them to meet.
In my slide, I talk a little bit about how psalms are used in worship in Judaism, and part of that is understanding what royal psalms are, which they are special psalms used for ceremonies like weddings, battles, coronations, things to do with royalty, and they were written for the Davidic kings in the first temple. After that, Jewish worshipers and groups, non-royal groups, would take some of these royal psalms and integrate them with other psalms that are not considered royal. And they would use them in order to understand the Bible in a different way, understand scripture in different lights, to use their wisdom to apply them to whatever circumstance they're in. So it's using them to not read them literally, but to adapt them to whatever use they may need.
So a common question many have when they're reading or studying the book of Psalms is, why are the Psalms grouped the way they are? Some biblical scholars believe that the grouping was to show the Psalms as an analogy to the Pentateuch. For example, Pastor Chuck Swindoll has a diagram I provided on the next slide, which shows his conclusion about how the Psalms are divided based on the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible. Something interesting to note is that the entire book of Psalms has a beginning and an end, duh. Psalm 1 serves as an introduction, Psalm 150 serves as a final doxology, and every book within the Psalms also has a beginning and an end, and it always ends with a doxology. Just to clarify, a doxology is an expression of praise to God. However, many biblical scholars feel that these groupings appear to be artificial. Many biblical scholars have come to the conclusion that the book of Psalms was and is a compilation of existing collections. Because of how some psalms duplicate each other almost word for word, like Psalm 14 and Psalm 53, scholars have concluded that there were several collections existing side by side. Other evidence that's been examined to explain the compilation of existing collections is the analysis of Psalm 72, which serves as an end to the prayers of David. But of course, after Psalm 72, there are more prayers of David. Furthermore, we have psalms that date back to the time of Moses all the way to the time of Prophet Ezra, thus meaning the writing of the book spans about 1,000 years. So there's even division among the authors of the Psalms. Traditionally, many give David the authorship of the entire book of Psalms, but that's not true. David wrote almost 50% of the Psalms, yes, but authors like Asaph, Korah, and their descendants, Moses, Solomon, Ethan, and Heman, who were Ezraites, wrote about 19% of the book of Psalms. The other 32% of the book of Psalms does not have an author mentioned. So to understand how these collections were formed and combined is made difficult because many individual psalms had constant development and adaptations made as time went on. Some private prayers were made into hymns, songs made in local sanctuaries were changed to be used in the temple, and some psalms that were that became anachronistic because of reasons like the destruction of the temple were changed to fit contemporary situations. So these issues make it difficult to date and find the original meaning/use of the Psalms.
Hey guys, this is Leanne Seawald. Today, I'm going to be talking about and analyzing a psalm that is still used today in liturgical settings in church. It's Psalm 16, verse 8. I know the Lord is always with me. I will not be shaken, for he is right beside me. As we know, the Psalms were written thousands of years ago, but today they still nourish the daily prayers of Christians and the whole church. They allow us to bear witness to faith, to sing it and share it with the words of the ancient Jews in exile. The Psalms were essentially a book of praises that originally helped to address the difficult lives of the Jews living in exile without a king. Psalms gave a voice of hope, fear, longing, and ultimately divine worship to God, a voice that modern Christianity can use and make sense of even in today's world. For the Jews in ancient Israel, this phrase was likely a source of strength as they endured their exile. This particular psalm is phrased in various ways depending on the version of the Bible you are reading. Some variations read that he is at my right hand, therefore I shall not be moved. Some questions that we could think about. For the exiled Jews in ancient Israel, how might this passage have either aided them in their darkest time or potentially make them question their faith in God due to their prolonged suffering? Also, how might this psalm be of help in faith in God today during our current troubled times?